I've made hyper-realistic cakes that make people say,
I can't believe that's a cake.
but now I want to make a cake that makes people say,
How in the world is that edible?
are you sure that's edible?
That doesn't look edible.
And I think I can do that by using some unique, rare edible materials that you've probably never heard of. Edible materials that don't look edible. I am gonna have a lot of fun with this. My name is Natalie Sideserf, and I make cakes that don't look like cakes. And today, I'm gonna make a cake that you won't believe you can eat. The first rare edible material that I'm gonna use is an edible fabric sheet. This right here. It looks like fabric. Fold it up.
Bendy?
Doesn't really have a strong flavor. Now, other than fabric, you can use it to make edible lace. Or in my case, edible netting. It falls apart. That's okay. This is not a bad thing. This is okay. I'm just smushing it into the mat anyway, because that's how you use it to make edible lace or edible net. Is this satisfying to watch? Because it's satisfying to do. It's like I'm spackling a hole in the wall. So I just let it dry and we've got some cracks. This is not gonna work. I know this works. It's just that this mat is a really delicate pattern. I just think I'm gonna need a little more practice before I can pull this one off. Now, at this very moment, I don't have hours to spend practicing, so I'm gonna set this idea aside and practice another day. But don't you worry, because I have another rare edible material that I wanna try out. Edible net is out. Are you ready to hear my backup plan? I want to try to make an edible piping bag. I use these things all the time, and I've always wanted to make one into a cake.
And
The edible material that's gonna make you ask,
Is that actually edible?
is the plastic. It's made of plastic. Now, I've made edible plastic using gelatin, but when I make it myself, it's far too fragile to make into a piping bag. So I got myself some cello sheets. It's a shiny edible sheet. And it feels much stronger than when I make it myself. Feels like a clear fruit roll-up. Ugh, I love fruit snacks. I'm using the real piping bag as a template, and I'm cutting the edible plastic into that shape. This looks so real that I'm starting to lose track of which one's which. Here we go, this is it. This is the edible one. Look at that, it's so realistic even I can barely believe it's edible. Now that we've got our edible bag, we've got to make an edible piping tip. I've got 3 tips here, a flower tip, a round tip, and a star tip. My 4th tip is to subscribe to this channel. Now, I want to have a little fun with these tips, so I'm placing cupcake liners over them, and we're gonna play a little game. Let's mix them up and pick one, and that will be the tip that we make. And it is the round tip. Round tip wins.
Shake these demons off my pen, keep going round and round the bed and back to 1, straight down from 10. I got the blurry vision, whirling in position, stuck in the same old mission, running out of ammunition.
All right, to make this round tip, I am going to make a mold. That way it's as close to the real shape of the tip as I can get it. We just gotta mix our best friends blue and white together and smoosh it over the piping tip. While we let the mold set, let's work on the buttercream that's going in this piping bag. Now, this is where things get wacky. I am melting chocolate, and here's why. Even though the piping bag that I made looks like the real thing, it's edible, so it's not as sturdy as the real thing. So I'm nervous that if I fill it with real green buttercream, it's not gonna hold up. It's gonna start spewing buttercream all over the place. Now, while that sounds like a lot of fun, if that happens, it's totally gonna ruin the cake. So rather than use real buttercream, I'm gonna use chocolate that I hope ends up looking like real buttercream. But before I add the chocolate, I gotta add the cake. You guys ready for things to get even wackier? This cake's gonna have 3 layers. The outside is a plastic piping bag, then a layer of chocolate, and the innermost layer is cake. So to make my life slightly easier, I'm gonna use cake dough rather than cake layers. Because I think that cake layers would start to break apart as I assemble everything, but cake dough is gonna hold its shape much better. I'm gonna pack it into a real piping bag, and then I'll place it in the fridge to chill. Cake dough is really dense, so when it gets cold, it gets really hard. So it'll be nice and sturdy when I go to assemble the cake. And it'll be in the perfect piping bag shape. You'll see what I mean in just a little bit. But before we assemble, we gotta make the piping tip. All right, just gotta take the piping tip out of the mold. Everything's looking good so far. And now I'm filling the mold with gray chocolate. I'm getting a little messy over here. To be fair, there is a hole on both ends of the mold, so. All right, that wasn't so bad. Now I just gotta let the chocolate harden. And now on to the main event. And by main event, I mean the most difficult part of this whole cake. Do you wear clothes or know someone who does? Well, get yourself some more by heading over to shop.sideserfcakes.com. That's where you can get some Sideserf Cake Studio clothes. We also have coffee mugs, stickers, beach towels, all kinds of stuff. I'll put a link below so you don't get lost on your way to the store. And now back to the cake. I'm adding a little plug to my piping tip, and then I'm placing it in the piping bag. This is all real stuff here, guys. None of it's edible. Yet. And look at that cake dough. It's definitely keeping its shape. I'm poking a wooden skewer through foam board and through my cake. And now I'm placing the piping bag into a glass, and I'm filling it with my green melted chocolate. This is wild. I don't know what's happening right now. I am making this up as I go. The piping bag is too big, so I gotta trim the top of that. And then it is time to place in the cake. Easy does it. I don't want the cake to touch the sides. It needs to be right in the center. I thought I could rest the black foam board on the top of the glass, but that's not happening. Gotta get rid of it. I'm just gonna take it off.
It fell.
I gotta pull it back out of there and be very gentle. And it's holding up, but like barely. I better put this in the fridge immediately. It needs to firm up so it keeps that shape. Let's all cross our fingers that that piping bag doesn't collapse in the fridge. All right, that was stressful. While we wait for all that, let's take the piping tip out of the mold. I'm trimming the edge with a blade so I can pop the chocolate out. Now this chocolate is really thin. I gotta be careful. This is definitely an easy cracker. This will definitely easily crack. And it looks pretty good. Nice and smooth. I just gotta make it shiny. I am glad this piping tip looks good because I was worried it was gonna give me a hard time. It looks clean, it's nice and shiny, and now we get to find out if the piping bag collapsed in the fridge. And here it is. It didn't collapse. This is awesome. This is great. I really thought it might, but it didn't. I'm cutting off the real plastic piping bag because I gotta replace it with an edible one. This is looking really good. The chocolate hardened in the shape of the bag. So it's got these like really subtle little creases. It looks cool. Gotta replace the real piping tip with the chocolate one. I feel like this is really starting to come together, but I'm not done yet. Here I've got my edible plastic and I'm wrapping it around the chocolate. You may have noticed that the top of the piping bag isn't looking too good. We've got some cake showing. So now that every single part of this cake is edible, I'm pouring a little more melted chocolate into the top and twisting the edible bag closed. Now, before I show you the finished cake, I have an idea. I know this is a little sudden, but I want to make one more piping bag cake. But this time, rather than using chocolate for the buttercream, I want to use real buttercream for the buttercream. Because I can't help but wonder if the edible piping bag is durable enough to hold all that buttercream. Or if it just busts open with buttercream everywhere. So I made everything exactly the same, only this time I'm filling the edible piping bag with buttercream rather than chocolate. So far, so good. Buttercream is staying in. I hope it stays sealed. Now let's have a look at both finished cakes, starting with the one filled with chocolate. And there you have it, an edible piping bag cake. I think that the chocolate does read as buttercream, but if you get really close, look, these little bubbles started to appear. It seems like the edible plastic doesn't love the chocolate. It's like kind of pulling away, and it's creating air pockets. Overall though, when you take a step back, it really does look like a piping bag. I really think this one's gonna be fun to cut, because it looks like mushy buttercream, but it's gonna be hard. Well, that chocolate was harder than I thought. Now let's have a look at the second cake, the buttercream-filled cake. Oh, I really like the way this one turned out. I'm so glad that I made a second. It's so fun to compare the two. This is going to be a very different cut than the first one. I had so much fun making these cakes today. If you like this video, and subscribe to this channel for a brand new hyper realistic cake every week. And I'll see you next week for another cake.